Welcome to Insights from the Couch, where real conversations meet real life at midlife.
We're Colette and Laura, two therapists and best friends, walking through the journey right alongside you. Whether you're feeling stuck, restless, or just unsure of what's next, this is a space for honest conversations, messy truths, and meaningful change.
And our Midlife Masterclass is now open. If you're looking to level up, get into action, and make midlife the best season yet, go to insightsfromthecouch.org and join our waitlist. Now let's dive in. Hi, guys. We've got a great episode today on college admissions, the new reality, because God knows it's changed so much back in the day when we were young, and how to not lose your mind when you're going through it with your kids.
Yeah, this one came to us by popular request. Actually, somebody asked me to do this episode, which I'm going through it right now with my youngest, so it's very fresh. But it is startling how quickly things have changed in the college admission space.
It's bad.
From even a couple years ago, but it's so funny. I used to see I still see young people, but I used to see them more often. So I had a college admission, the best colleges in America book from 2013.
Yeah.
And the admission rates for we live in Florida, so our big state universities like Florida State University, University of Florida, where many people who are raising kids in this community went themselves, are now literally nearly impossible to get into.
Yeah.
Without stratospheric scores or passion projects or you name it.
And even with stratospheric scores, kids can't get into these schools. So it's crazy. And I think that's going on in a lot of states. We also have massive population explosion in Florida. We're now the third largest state. And we've only really got a handful of these state schools. And it's very much the popular tradition here. But we see it all across the country. I know my friends up north, out west. It seems that it's become a source of tremendous anxiety for parents, for kids, feelings of failure, disappointment, not feeling successful. Whereas when we were young, I went to a pretty competitive school where everybody went to college. It was very small, all-girls Catholic school. I've talked about that on here before. But everybody went to college. There were only 42 girls. College was very important. It was a big deal even back then. And yet it was still pretty chill. I applied to 12 schools. I got into all of them. I wasn't super stressed about it. My parents weren't super involved. I did have some pressure to go to a school my dad wanted me to go to, which I promptly put a stop to by just saying, I'm not even applying, so screw off, right? I knew I wanted more. But this is a very different world. And my kids went to college, it's a while ago now. I can't even do the math, 6-7 years ago that I was first starting this. And like you said, it seems like it's changed since then. So before we even identify the problem more, tell me this, Laura, what are you seeing with your own kid right now?
Well, that's kind of my youngest is a little bit of an outlier, so I don't know if I want to use him as an example, but I have 3 very different kids who've had 3 very different situations.
Same with mine.
So I'll just say that my oldest is my daughter, who could not really use test scores, had a pretty averagely decent GPA, a really good resume, but couldn't use test scores because didn't test well. She went to a private school. That was her solution, where it was test optional. So we did something like that. But it was really costly. And then my middle son has decided to go to Valencia because he also is he's got a math disability. So he's working and going to Valencia, and we'll do a direct connect to UCF.
And Valencia, describe what that is.
That's our community college in Winter Park, Orlando area, which is becoming a popular option. But I've got to say, as somebody who grew up in the Northeast, just like you, Colette, when I came to Florida, I was I was so haughty about it. I was my kids will never go to a school in Florida.
Me too. Oh my God, me too.
My tune has radically changed over the years for many reasons. And then my youngest is like my traditionally has the grades, has the classes, has the test scores. So like I don't know, but his path is just, I think what is so interesting is that in years past you would say, oh, this kid has everything he needs. He'll get in everywhere. And that is simply not the case anymore.
Right.
And I think that's startling for parents to realize what a disappearing island some of these spots are.
Well, that's the thing about like when I think about my own pathway, yes, I had good grades and I had good scores, but not to this level. I mean, back then, 35 years ago when I was applying to college, nobody had 1500s. It was like one crazy Mensa kid who went to MIT. It was just unheard of. Like if you got in the 1300s, it was like, wow, that was like extremely good. And, with my own kids, what I saw, they are also very different. And Charlotte, knew both of my kids wanted to go in-state. They're like super Floridians. They're super into Florida. They went to Winter Park High School, which is our local public high school that has, I don't know, thousands of kids, right? 700 kids a grade, whereas my whole high school had about 160 people, I think, max in the whole school. So they wanted to go to these big state schools, but Charlotte knew that Florida State, neither of those was going to be in the cards on any planet. And she ended up going to University of North Florida and then really not liking it and transferring. So that was a bit of a different trajectory and, hard for her to know what would work. It was also during COVID, the beginning of COVID. So that was a layer of complexity. And then with Curran, it's so interesting because she got into Florida State. She had the scores, she had the grades. I mean, not like 1550, but good scores and good grades. And she got into Florida State where her stepsister went and her sister, Charlotte, was in Tallahassee, and she did not want to go. And this is, you see all these kids like who are dying to go there.
Yeah.
And I really loved this. And this is going to segue into, I think, one of the points we want to make today is that, she went to visit and she said, and, here she has two sisters there. And she said, this is not for me. Tallahassee is gross, which it is, by the way. No offense to all you Florida State people. Florida State's great, but the city is yuck. I mean, it's really gross. And if you're into Florida State, you don't care, but she's not a partier. And obviously Florida State isn't only about partying, but the whole vibe there, the big football energy, she didn't care about. She's really outdoorsy. She loves the beach. I mean, she just moved to Hawaii. So she picked FAU, Florida Atlantic, which even a few years ago was becoming very popular, but has become even more so now. And she was so happy there. And I think what she chose, nobody could believe she was saying no to this school, that was so good and so coveted.
So tired,
Right. And actually, you know what? As I say this, I feel like it's very much what I did because nobody could believe I was saying no to Vanderbilt back in the day. I was between Vanderbilt and Tulane. Vanderbilt was probably technically the better school. It was definitely where my parents preferred I go. Of all 12 of the schools, those were my top two. And when I went to visit, I said, this is just not the right place for me. And that was more important than the best school, the bumper sticker, the cachet. And I think this is part of it is that we've got to have some perspective about this process is ridiculous. It's not fair to parents. It's not fair to kids. It's too expensive. It's too competitive. It's not good for anyone's mental health. And while we can't control that, what we can control is keeping some perspective that this is really about your child choosing the right environment for them holistically, for their mental health, for their interests, for who they are. It is not going to make or break their life where they go. It's not.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things we really have to touch on is cost. I got some perspective on cost. I went to boarding school, so maybe this is not totally applicable, but this will give you some perspective. The boarding school I went to when I went there in 1996 cost $16,000 a year, which in 1996 was a chunk of change. 10 years later, I ran into a guy in Westlake, Ohio with my husband wearing my alma mater shirt. And I was like, oh my God, I went there too. And he said, yeah, we're spending $40K a year.
Yeah.
To send our kid there. Now, fast forward, I'm helping to plan my 30-year high school reunion. And the guy who's helping us that works at the school says it's really hard to get your class back because our cost is so, it just doesn't work for your generation. Like your class is so uninvolved. It is now $70K a year
I'm not
to
surprised.
go to a boarding school. Okay, so then just put that on college and it's the same sort of mushrooming where now it's not uncommon, like for a private school in the state of Florida, like University of Miami, you'll spend $90,000 a year. Same for like a place like NYU. These are pricing people out of the market, but even on a more applicable stage, the difference between being able to use your Bright Futures, and we have a really nice scholarship program in the state of Florida that if you can get different levels of help.
Curran got that,
all the way up to full coverage of your tuition in an in-state school, which is like gold. This is another reason people are just dive bombing on these spots because nobody wants to pay for college. So your other option is if you don't get into one of these Florida schools or you don't choose one of them, you're now paying somebody else's out-of-state tuition for their public school.
Well, this is what happened even at Tulane, because back when I went, it was extremely expensive. I think it was close to $50,000, which 35 years ago was very, very expensive. And you were basically paying for your kid and a scholarship kid.
Yes.
And I think Rollins kind of does that too. A lot of schools have that. And, there are a lot of people who fall in the middle where they really don't qualify for any support, but they're not the uber rich who can afford to stroke $100,000 a year for multiple kids. So I think we've got to normalize nonlinear pathways, non-traditional options, and let's just be real that there are so many other, I really believe this, and I'm the biggest education person around. I was just like you when I moved here. I was like, what is UCF?
CF.
Like, I've never even heard of that.
I know.
I was like, ew, it can't be good. And meanwhile, UCF is amazing. It's a huge school, University of Central Florida. Yeah. So I've changed my tune also. And I think we both grew up in that Northeastern, like a bit of snobbishness around education.
Totally. Education was like more valuable than
anything. And
other
people
thing.
Didn't even think it like made sense that I was going to Tulane. Which is a good school. My parents were like, ew, no, you're not going there. So I've come a long way. But there are kids who college isn't necessarily the right pathway. There are many different ways to go to college, taking a gap year, traveling first, transferring schools, going to a community college and then transferring in. This is something that a lot of kids do and is totally viable and acceptable. I think the problem, before we get into solutions, that I want to make sure we say is that a lot of parents, and we both see this as therapists and also among our friends, so many parents, this has become a cornerstone of their identity.
Yes.
And this is where it's really problematic. Two things: the fear and making your kids' college choice about your own identity. So I think when you're scared, this leads to micromanaging, right? Instead of support and guidance and like a healthy perspective. And it leads to over-involvement. And it also is contaminatory for your kids, that fear, that obsession. I also think that this has got to be, if this feels so important to you, I think one of the things we're going to challenge you to do today is get curious about why. And is it really about your kid? Because it doesn't really matter. My life was amazing, even though I didn't go to Vanderbilt, and it really doesn't matter as much as you might think. Your child will get over their initial disappointment if they're disappointed. Take a look at yourself and what maybe you're struggling with your own identity. Does this feel like some kind of validation? Are you scared of what comes next in your own life, at midlife in particular? And is it easier to fixate on this?
I'm compassionate towards this because I was raised by a mother whose education was everything. And I think her identity was really wrapped up in us being educated and all that it entailed. And then I pulled that forward into my own life, and especially certain circles, especially if you're at a private school where everybody is uber involved and it's all about the next step. And it's very hard to accept that you've invested so much money into your kids only to realize like they're not going to have what you envisioned as the quintessential college experience. No, this is like really challenging for some
I understand
people.
that. I'm well aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
you
that's
just
your
don't
work.
relate to it.
I think that's your work. We all have these things. But like as a parent, it's not healthy for it to be about where my kid goes says something about me. I'm not compassionate toward it. And I agree that if it's your environment, it's difficult. But I think that's the inner work.
It's the environment. I think when you put yourself in that environment, because I had kids that went to public school and they had a much more expansive, permissive experience in terms of there were so many different paths being chosen and validated. And it felt like an open highway. That was my favorite thing about sending two of my kids to public school.
Yeah, but even in the public schools, there are IB programs. There are parents there are a lot of people here go to the local high school, which is a very good high school. And there are kids that normalize, but there are kids with pressure. I mean, I think the bottom line is like your social milieu. But like you said, you grew up with a mother that was overinvested. And not that I'm not compassionate toward it, but that isn't healthy or fair to your kids. And you've managed, despite being, I would argue, in a lot of those environments, like having your kids in that realm, being friends with people who operate that way, having had a mother who operated that way, and you haven't put that on your kids. So again, I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying this is the work to do because it's not fair to your children, it's not healthy, and it's not good for either of your mental health.
Yeah, and I'll just be really honest. Like, I confronted that work because I realized that my kids weren't going to have a traditional path.
Me too.
But I had to confront that work because of what I knew were the limitations of some of my kids.
Yeah.
And but what it did for me and what I hope it does for people who, if maybe they're only confronting this now at college, where they're like, holy shit, my kids had a really great high school experience, but they're not qualified for what I thought they'd be qualified for. It is now your turn to get a much more expansive view of what is possible.
Yes. And so for me, it was more that I realize, and this is the danger we can all do, whether it's the culture you're in, what your parents set up for you, the way you grew up is always there, or projecting your own experience. So I wanted for my kids, for me, I'm not a keeping up with the Joneses person. Like I'm not a statusy person. So I didn't care about where my kids went as a reflection on me. What I did feel the urge to project, and I had to catch myself, is that I wanted my kids to have what I found valuable. I went to a different part of the country. I experienced very different kinds of people, Southern culture I'd never experienced. You know, it was a very different school. I went to Catholic school. Tulane is predominantly Jewish and like Southern Protestant. So very different cultural vibe, different part of the country. I wanted my kids to go to school in the Northeast because I thought, you're such little Floridians. Go out in the world or go out west or go somewhere different. And I had to realize that was exciting to me, but that wasn't their interest. So I think it is, whether it's about identity or just wanting the best genuinely for your kids, there has to be a healthy amount of detachment and acceptance because one, even if your kid is a rock star with a 1550 on the SATs, straight A's and every community service and sport under the sun, they may not get into where you want them to get into. And two, your child should have the most active voice in this choice.
Yeah. No, for sure. But I think it's incumbent on the parent to help really, again, open up that highway for like how many roads there are
Yes,
to actually get to where you want to go. I think it
exactly.
becomes this like,
Myopic,
yeah,
obsessive.
yeah, that it feels like there's only one path.
Exactly.
And the school that you're in may even project that. That's what I was saying about being in some of these private school environments. It feels like there's one path. And when you can't manage to make that happen, you feel like a failure. The
Totally.
parent feels like a failure. So getting like this, I got a much bigger
Yeah,
imagination.
you've got to get a perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
There are
And
so many ways through.
right. And these are like, 1%er problems here. I'm not minimizing that this is like the thing, but if you had to worry about putting food on the table, you certainly wouldn't be so obsessed with where your kid goes to school. Let's remember our child breathing, that they're alive, that they're healthy, and that they're thriving, again, holistically, is really the thing. You're absolutely right. We can all get in our little bubble and get infected with competitiveness, comparison. But yes, we're saying the same thing really. Like it's hard, it's real, and you've got to do some of your own inner work. And I think the biggest thing is not project this on your child, even if you're feeling it, and help your kid have some of that perspective too. So let's get into some of these tips that you and I put together to help parents actually do this. All right, you want to go first?
Yeah, support instead of over-involvement. Yeah, I think it's really incumbent on us to stay like I always picture an airplane and that the child is the airplane and you're kind of like over the wing and you're just kind of watching and
How about air
sort of
traffic control? Your air
or even
traffic control.
yeah, I love it. Your air traffic
like,
control.
okay, if you're going to crash, I'm going to say something, but otherwise I'm
Yeah.
going to monitor the flight and I'm going to let you fly the plane.
I'm going to let you fly the plane. I'm outside the system and I'm just kind of watching and again asking some Socratic questions and helping you clarify what it is you really want.
Yeah. Yeah. And
now the hard thing is that if your kid really wants something that they're not going to be able to get or that you can't afford.
Right.
That's a piece.
Yeah. And, those are things that is what it is. And it's maybe there's some grief in the process of coming to acceptance with it. But I think, again, that when you're fearful and you're radiating anxiety, that's when we tend to micromanage, to hyper control. And emotions are very easily felt and picked up on. We know they're contagious. This is why we're relational beings, right? We pick up what other people are putting down. So I think it's really important, again, that you're setting this calm presence for kids. And I like the idea of, support sounds more like not do this. Did you do this? What are you doing? Did you get it? Support sounds like, how can I help? Would you like my help? Is there anything I can do to support you? You know, and you can provide this very grounded environment that is not filled with anxiety, but that is like, okay, you know what? Well, you might not get into every school and there might be some disappointment in the process, but let's do our best and focus on the process and not the outcome. And I'm here to support and guide you, but I'm not going to take control of this or make this my thing.
Yeah. And I remember working with a kid who literally did not get any of his stuff in and kind of kept punting this process and really did have natural consequences from it. And the parent sort of let him have natural consequences. And it was probably the best thing for him.
Yep.
And so it's, can you be calm in that storm of watching? Because there's a lot of kids, I'll give you this one, are not ready for college.
Oh my God.
When it's time to go.
Right.
So it's like, can you let this process play out a little bit and see that maybe what happens is for the best?
Yeah. And as I get into number 2 here, we are already talking about it, be the calm in the storm. we're already mentioning this throughout the episode, but kids really do take their emotional cues from you. So you're going to feel what you feel, but be aware of what you're radiating and what your kids are seeing, and realize that if you're really stressed and getting so upset, I mean, I know someone right now like this, that it's her kids got to be feeling how obsessed this person is with the college process. It can't be good. But your kid can pick that up as I'm failing or I'm not enough. And that's
my God, if this doesn't work out, my mom won't be able to handle it.
Yes, or if this doesn't work out, my life is over. Remember, psychologically, kids at 17, 18 years old, 19 years old, however old they are, if they're on a traditional path out of high school, going into college, developmentally, their brains are still really a work in progress. And so things can feel very big and very final. And the last thing they need is more stress and pressure around this, because it can start to feel like I'm disappointing my parents. I'm not good enough. This is going to ruin my whole life, right? And we've got to really help them to minimize those scary feelings that are already there for them because of their school environments.
Yes. And then the next one, I'm just going to skip to protect your home with boundaries, because I think boundaries are important. I think the parent has to have boundaries. I
agree
that I think we have to know, what we can afford, what we can really, you cannot overpromise on these things. I'll pay to send you out of state and I'll foot the bill for $50,000 a year. If that is not something your family can absorb, that you would have to second mortgage your house to do so.
Yeah.
So figure out where your boundaries are. And I guess I want to extend onto that this is where I think the biggest opportunity for both parent and child is to think irreverently, to think creatively, to think expansively about all the different ways. If your kid wants to be an attorney, or your kid wants to, I don't know, be a doctor or whatever, there are so many ways to get there from here. And to get stuck on a rigid path is a real fault of imagination. So that's one thing I want to
Beautifully said. And I think that really covers the next one. So I'm going to skip over to the last, because you're right. There isn't one way to do this. And that is the cool thing about today. There are so many options, and with the end outcome of your child having a career where they can support themselves and they are mentally healthy and they're happy, that's really what it's about. And sometimes we've just got to pull out. I'm even going through this with my book thing. It's just an analogy. Is I have to remember, this isn't the cure for cancer. This isn't life or death. It feels so important and it matters, but it isn't the thing that it can feel like it is when you're in the weeds. So I think that a more expansive path and perspective is really important. And then, of course, we touched on this a little, but protect your kids from comparison culture and protect yourself. Comparison is the thief of joy, of connection. You are going to destroy your own well-being with anxiety and your kids if you get pulled into competitive conversations. We've already got social media destroying this for everybody because there's just too much that you can see. It's too easy to feel inadequate. So help your child focus on their own personal growth, that they're competing with themselves, meaning it's about being your best self. It's about continuing to evolve, not doing what all the other kids in your class are doing or on social media. It's about finding your way.
Yeah. And I go back to our conversation with Meg J about what's important at this age. I mean, nobody's really going to call you out on a daily basis in your adult life for your undergraduate diploma. Nope, they just won't.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah. Or you're just where did you go to school? That just it just doesn't come up that much. But what kind of things what kind of experiences does your child want to have? Do they want to go abroad? Do they want to have internships? Do they want to work while they're in school? How do you begin to just build a life or help them construct the life that they want to have? And it doesn't look one way. I have my son actually follows this woman on TikTok. I think her account is like Florida College Mom or something. And she's so creative. She shows kids how you can get a fast AA using CLEP scores. Do you know that about CLEPs?
No.
Okay. But this is fascinating. This is my point about having creative thinking.
Yeah.
Like between your AP scores and if you were an IB or even if you did dual enrollment, you can literally go and take CLEP exams that are, hour and a half long exams at a testing center and test out of basic English and math and science credits for undergrad. So it's just, she's showing how you can do a fast AA in like a summer. And I just think that is so cool. Like
I agree.
there are ways to get where you want to go that aren't costly, that just take a little sweat equity, that you can see different paths.
Yeah. And take releasing the identity piece, which is the work. And, I just want to say, as we wrap up, this obviously we have no control over, but our system is so wrong. It would be so much better to get these kids out of school, and I think they kind of do this in Europe and other places, and have not even just a gap year, have kids work a year or two, or in some places kids are in the military. Have some real world experiences. That's how you really find yourself. And then go back to school and study when you have a little bit of a clue of a pathway. This whole education path doesn't really fit anymore where people are developmentally, because kids are in many ways more emotionally immature than they've ever been, but they're being subjected to all of this stress that is just absurd. So until the system gets fixed, if it ever gets fixed, let's all try to hold on to our sanity, normalize that this process is hard. Everyone's obsessed with it, so it makes it hard not to be obsessed with it, but your kid's going to be okay. And your job is really to support them. Use that creative thinking, be the calm, grounding presence, support, don't micromanage, and know that at the end of the day, your kid's going to find their way and it's all going to work out in the end.
Yeah, well said. And I just would second the fact that there are always choices. You always have choices. Even when you feel like you don't, there's always choices. And can you begin to find what the next best choice is?
Yeah.
And help your kid find that.
Yes. Amen to that. All right. Well,
college
this is
season.
Yeah, college season. It's tough and it's going to be okay. So we hope you guys got some good insights from our couch today that will help you if you're on this process. And please share the episode with any friends you know who are going through this. We deal with a lot of clients in our offices who are struggling with this process. So we hope this helped. And don't forget to leave us a review. It really helps so much for us to get this important podcast out into the world so that we can help as many people as possible. And we're grateful to you all for listening.
All right. Bye, guys.